All right. Well, welcome to the Men Are Forged podcast. Got a great guest today, Evan Burk. His book is Finding Intangibles. Really excited to interview him. Evan, great to have you.
Cartwright, really excited to be here. And thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. Well, I love starting with kind of early days. My listeners kind of love the story part. So but I like to kind of start with something kind of maybe a little more fun. What was, I don't know. What was kind of an early childhood memory? What was one of your fondest memories growing up?
Well, just to kind of connect it to my story a little bit, I was very fortunate. My grandfather had season tickets to the Dallas Cowboys. My first memory of being in the old Texas Stadium was watching Herschel Walker play football. This is way back, showing my age right now.
That's pre-Super Bowl, like Jimmy Johnson.
Pre-Super Bowl Jimmy Johnson, and really about the time that I was becoming sports conscious, that the Cowboys were becoming this great team. And that was really cool to share those memories with my grandfather, the family, and, be a part of kind of just the excitement that it was back then in the early 90s of having a really great team, and like the way sports has an ability to connect people, and that, you asked for a memory. That was kind of one of the memories that stood out. I have a weird mind where I can talk and recall really intricate details from every game that I've attended or coached in, scores. And, I remember grandpa made us leave 10 minutes early from this NFC championship game, and all these different things. But I just have a lot of fond memories of spending time with him and my siblings and cousins going to those games.
Oh, wow. So do you remember like the triplets that time period? Do you remember much of that especially that first Super Bowl? Because I imagine that was probably as a fan, because they had basically come from like a 1-win team when they first drafted Troy Aikman. Do you have like a memory of stepping in like, wow, we're going to beat the 49ers? Like that was a big game. Do you remember any of those games?
Oh yeah, of course. 49ers was obviously the biggest rival that we had. And, growing up, we'll put it on the table. I was born in 1983. So about the time that Jimmy Johnson showed up, I'm 6-7 years old. I'm just starting to understand, what sports is and all these different things. And definitely remember going to those games. I remember how good we were. Of course, I had no idea like what all that meant. But one thing I do kind of remember, this isn't like a specific memory, but I can just remember Troy Aikman throwing these beautiful high arcing passes that would just kind of like seem to just like stick up in the air at the pinnacle of their flight and just kind of like drop down perfectly into Michael Irvin's hands, Jay Novacek, Alvin Harper. All the millennials on listening to the podcast are like, who are you talking about? But
I know I'm a millennial. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Back in my childhood, these guys were big deals. So obviously a fun time as a fan and as a future football coach to kind of look back on those memories.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember watching like Michael Irvin, having an interview with him. I know I'm going probably too far down a rabbit trail here but I love football. As a former football coach myself, I didn't coach at your level. I coached like ninth graders, but like I remember seeing an interview with Michael Irvin. He said 9 out of 10 times he could run around blindfolded and the ball would hit him in the hands. He said from Troy. So, I mean, there was that much precision. And he was actually pretty underrated. I mean, just because he's an offense that was, very run heavy. And it's interesting. They always talk about his numbers could have been so much better if he was in a more modern offense. So,
yeah, if you want to turn this into a football podcast, we easily can right now.
Right.
But yes, to just put a bow on it, Troy Aikman, one of the all-time most accurate passers in the history of the NFL. And had he played at a different time, would probably hold countless number of records, not only for the Cowboys, but he would probably have a boatload league records as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I got my fill of No football talk. I think. Well, we may come back. So
we can jump back into it anytime, just so you know.
You're good. So so going back to early influence, you mentioned your granddad, going to games with him. Who were some of your other early influences, like especially like high school, college time, that really kind of started molding your thinking as a man?
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, sure thing. I think my grandfather, I kind of just referenced going to games with him. That was just a memory I have. But, somebody who represented a lot of the work ethic and, passion for taking care of their family that you would want to emulate growing up, and was very fortunate to have him and such a great model of leadership and of manhood to look up to.
Yeah.
I think also my sports coaches. And I think that a lot of coaches, I would imagine, would probably say similar things. Yeah. That they can recall early experiences in a sport or in sports in general that really kind of influenced them and had a profound impact on them. And that was that was me. I can remember distinctly I wrestled in high school. I was on the football team, not necessarily like the greatest athlete, but in wrestling in particular, I started my freshman year, which for a lot of wrestlers, especially good wrestlers, that's pretty late to start.
Yeah.
And that coach in particular that was at the high school, legendary coach in the state of Texas where I grew up, and really had a profound impact on me just in terms of what it took to be successful and understanding the discipline and the consistency and the work ethic that it takes to experience success in any walk of life. This was obviously, I was a high school wrestler. I was, 15 years old, 17, 18 years old, but I was able to have a lot of success in wrestling. And I attribute a lot of that, not to myself or my own talent in wrestling, but to my coach and being a part of the program that he had built, and him empowering older wrestlers at the time when I was a freshman, sophomore, to teach me and to kind of show me the way, so that when I was a junior and a senior, I was ready to be a somewhat proficient wrestler and, had a pretty good senior year. But that experience was incredibly profound, as it would be for any young athlete. And I'm talking about wrestling, but this could be any sport, just to build confidence. And I think understand what it takes to be successful in anything that you do.
Yeah, man, like that word confidence, being successful. I think as men, we like, especially in our early 20s, we just kind of go into it and we kind of really just take what's modeled to us, and we don't actually hear the words that are spoken. So, I mean, that coach, do you remember some of the things, like what specifically gave you confidence to think, man, I could go and be a coach or be successful or do these things? Do you remember anything specific that he said?
What I think about is the feel of walking into that wrestling room. I remember the feel of him acknowledging a job well done, or a good practice, or winning a tough match. It's really interesting just in terms of my evolution as a coach, because I'm talking about Coach Rick Ortega. A lot of people, nobody's going to know in the audience who that is, but to me, had a profound impact on who I became. And it's interesting because he led very differently than I lead, and that I led in my coaching. And I think early on, you were talking about, being in your early 20s. And I think, like, as a young coach, I started coaching when I was 19. I tried very hard to emulate Rick Ortega. Yeah. And Rick Ortega's style was his own. He was a former college wrestler, had a ton of success as a coach. He's a physically intimidating person. I don't know how old he was when he was coaching me, but let's just say he's in his early to mid 50s. He could still wipe the floor with anybody on the team. Yeah. And he did not have this style where he was just kind of like, hey, Cartwright, come on, you can do it. Yeah. There were very high standards that were set for everybody in that program. And there were no exceptions made. Just because I started as a freshman and other people had been wrestling for 6 years.
Wow.
The standards for me were exactly the same. And I think that, he had a leadership style where he wasn't rah-rah. He wasn't kind of this ultra positive person in terms of just being positive for the sake of being positive. He set high standards. And if you didn't meet those high standards, like, he let you know. And it wasn't that he yelled at you. It was almost like he ignored you. And as a way, like, his disappointment in you, he didn't even have to yell. Like, the standards were so high and you wanted to please him so much that, like, if he didn't talk to you after a match, and I can remember one match in particular that I lost, and like, I walked over to get my post-match debriefing and he didn't acknowledge me, and that crushed me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, like, look, there's different facets of leadership. And I'm not saying that to, like, that was a profound moment for me. It was like, in that moment, I was like, I'm never going to let this happen again. And I think that's also something that's, like, misconstrued, especially, like, at the higher levels of coaching. We view coaching as, like, what we see in the movies, or these clips we see on the sideline of, like, me dressing you down or, like, yelling at you. And it's like, we want to see that as fans. That's coaching. And that's not coaching. And coaching, I think, a lot of times is about influence and taking somebody to push beyond what they're capable of achieving on their own. And I think that was his way, and he had a very unique style and had a ton of success. And like I said, I'm not telling the story to highlight it in a negative way. I'm highlighting it in a positive way, that, like, that was his unique style, and it drove me to heights in wrestling that I could not have done on my own. And it did not have to be done by embarrassing me. It did not have to be done by yelling at me. And it didn't have to be done by building me up. It was simply done by setting very high standards and holding everybody to those high standards, and letting you know when they weren't met, even if that meant not acknowledging your effort or you walking off the match as a loser. So I'm starting to go down a rabbit hole here, but that was extremely powerful for me. And I think going to college, and I wasn't recruited to compete in college. I wasn't that type of an athlete, but I think as I went through college, I was kind of you're involved in sports your whole life. There's a piece of not only the exercise piece, but as I mentioned, the building confidence piece, the camaraderie of the team, the competition, and you lose that once you leave sports. And I think I was missing that as a 19-year-old in college, and wanted to reclaim some of that. And that's what led me down my coaching path.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, that's interesting. So what made you choose football coaching? If you had such this impactful, experience as on a wrestling team, what made you choose football and get into football coaching?
So to start with, I started coaching at 19, and this was just youth sports, right? This is 4th, 5th grade basketball, soccer, baseball, obviously, eventually football. And
this is while you're in school at college.
Yeah, excuse me. So I was 19, 20 years old, coaching all these teams at the local YMCA. This football team, this 4th grade football team, was through the Boulder Rec Center, but it was just youth coaching while I was in college. And I just had this feeling that, like, I wanted something more. But as I started to have these coaching experiences, and I was going through business school and kind of questioning, am I really going to go do business, whatever that meant? And I was really feeling a pull towards being involved in sports. And that could have been marketing, that could have been sports management, or a host of different things. But I think I started to have these coaching experiences, and it was very true to who I was in terms of what I wanted to do, having impactful work that I was doing, and teaching leadership through sports, because it taught me so much. And I think that was kind of the start of my coaching journey. And yes, I was in college while I was having all of these experiences, and specific to football has a bigger staff than basketball.
Yeah.
I also kind of viewed basketball, even though I love the sport of basketball, basketball is, and look, all of coaching at the highest level specific to basketball and football is like, there's a lot of shadiness involved. We don't have to get into that. But like at the time, early 2000s, there were a lot of scandals. There was a lot of stuff coming out about cheating and junior colleges and all sorts of stuff. And I just like, basketball staffs have 3 coaches, football staffs have 15 coaches. Yeah. And it was just kind of like, I was 20 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, football might be an easier path. It seems like there's more slots available to find. But I loved basketball. I loved football. And even though I have wrestling holds a special place in my heart, but I didn't love wrestling and have a passion for it the way I did those other sports.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So you're 19, 20, and you're getting into coaching. So what led you down the path to actually make it your career? It went from, coaching at the local youth team to then like, all right, this is a career.
Yeah. So I think that started because I was having those experiences, and I had an idea when I had started all of this, when I made the transition to like start coaching football, I had a vision in my mind that like, oh, I want to be the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys or the University of Texas or the University of Colorado. Like that was my North Star. Yeah. Specifically Colorado, because that's where I went to college, University of Colorado, and
Boulder.
And I was in Boulder. Yes. Yeah. And it's an amazing place. Absolutely loved it there. And my dream was to come back there as the head coach. And that was kind of what started to fuel me as I got started in my coaching career. And I wanted to be the head coach at the University of Colorado. By the way, not a former player outside of high school. Don't know anybody that's a coach. Don't have a dad that's an NFL executive. Had no idea what it meant to be a coach. But I was enjoying the coaching experiences I was having. And that's the vision I created for myself was eventually to be the head coach at the University of Colorado. So I didn't know where to start. And that's what led me to 4th grade football was, oh, okay, well, I probably can't coach at the University of Colorado right now. Yeah. So where can I coach? Oh, fourth grade rec football. Yeah. And so that was where the journey started. But like, I was very intentional about, oh, okay, I'm going to be the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys and I don't know where to start. So I'm going to start at the bottom and I'm just going to start coaching and go from there. And life is like this. Any success in business or in sports is like this. You build upon your experiences. And I don't know if I was fully conscious of what I was doing, but that was definitely kind of part of my plan was I can't be a college coach right now. So let me be a 4th grade coach. And after I finish being a 4th grade coach, I'll worry about like what the next step is after that. But right now I'm just going to like be in this moment of like coaching 4th grade. And that ended up being very symbolic of the way I treated every year of my coaching journey. And I think part of the reason I was able to progress and be promoted every year of my coaching career was because I treated each year as that was the only year that I was thinking about, because truly it was. My mentality was always like, okay, the next 10 months is going to focus on this role, this job. And then after this 10 months, all my focus is going to go to whatever's next, even if I didn't know what that next thing was going to be.
Gotcha. So now looking back on it, I mean, you kind of said this is what your vision was at 20 and this is what made sense to you. What advice would you give that guy? And what did you feel like now you learned about like, oh, maybe it wasn't football specifically, but it was actually being a mentor or something. Yeah. So just give me a little bit of just like retrospect now. How would you view that? I love giving this question. Yeah. Just what would you give the advice to your 25-year-old self now, what you know, right?
So a couple things come to mind. Number one, if I could only pick one thing, it would be to give myself books. Specifically, I would give myself How to Win Friends and Influence People by
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie.
Mm-hmm.
That is the number one thing. If I could only pick one thing to give myself as a 20-year-old or 25-year-old, that would be the book I would give myself. The other book is called Mindset by Carol Dweck. And the reason I mentioned that book is because she talks a lot in that book about the secret to success in terms of any field. And there's a lot in there about teaching and about coaching and about high performers in sport that is about growth mindset, and how that growth mindset, that ability to overcome failures, that ability to learn from your failures and your success, really leads to success in a lot of fields. And I felt when I read that book towards the end of my coaching career that that was a book I should have read my first year in coaching. So I'd give myself those two books. The second thing I would do is I would, you mentioned mentors. I would definitely encourage myself to find mentors that understood me. And I think one of the things, and I think any young man or woman could identify with this, like when you're young, you like, for most of us, like we think we're great. Our parents are telling us we're great. But, you know, in my case, my mom is always telling me how great I am. Yeah. Everybody must think I'm great. Yeah. And that's not the case. Like not everybody's not looking out for you. And a lot of times, like you have to be able to parse through a lot of nonverbal communication, a lot of like what's not being said to understand like, oh, this person does not care about me. I'm filling a role on this coach's staff or in this person's life or whatever. And like, they don't really care about Evan. And I think like, I would encourage myself to find the mentors that saw in me what was there. In other words, I think a lot, especially early in my career, and, you know, look, I'm nearly 40, but I'm fully aware that like clean shaven, I look like I'm 24 years old. So you can imagine at 23 years old what I looked like clean shaven. So like I look super young. I didn't play football. I don't have a dad that's a coach. Everybody's probably wondering like, what the hell is this guy doing here? Yeah. And then coupled with the fact that like, I didn't realize it at the time, but there were a lot of people that didn't see the intangibles that I possess that were going to allow me to reach the heights that I reached. And it's really crucial for anybody to find those people that believe in you and understand you. So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing I would say is like, don't waste your time coaching fourth grade football. Don't waste your time coaching high school. Go get in the biggest football program you possibly can. Now, specific to me, I would tell myself to move to Baton Rouge to be on the 2001 LSU or 2003 LSU football team, because it was coached by Nick Saban, and there were like 10 future college head coaches on that staff. Yeah. So that would probably, actually, I said I would give myself How to Win Friends and Influence People. Scratch that. That's what I would tell myself. But in terms of college coaching, the bigger the program you're in, the more opportunities potentially are going to be there within the program. And then also you're meeting more people. And so for me, not having a network, it would have probably been beneficial, instead of wasting my time in fourth grade football and in high school, to go straight up to the football office at the University of Colorado and ask to be a student assistant or to watch film or whatever. Yeah. And I didn't know that that was something you could do. I didn't know you could just walk up to the office and just say, hi, I'm Evan Burk. And like, I'm thinking about coaching high school here, but like, can I just open letters and like respond to them and watch film and blog the film? Like there's a lot of things.
Yeah. Cause there's so,
and just gotten into the football program. And then who knows, right? Like now you're there. Nobody may even know who you are, but you just need one coach to find you and just be like, oh, I can give Evans. He's great at making photocopies. Oh, let me give him that. And, you know, build on those experiences, much like I did when I got to college coaching at SMU. But those are kind of the things that I think about when I think about advice, books, find the right mentors, and don't waste your time coaching fourth grade football. You could just go straight to college and be like a ball boy. And like, now you're on the plane flying with them to all these games that you're going to be watching anyway. But there is like a bit of, as you know, again, I'm kind of being a little self-serving here, but there is a little bit of beauty in going from fourth grade football to the NFL in 6 years. So like, I don't know if I would give that up, because that became a huge part of my story is like my ability to access these rooms that I had no idea how to access them, but I still had the ability to get in those rooms that, quite honestly, a lot of people don't have the ability to get into.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess for anybody out there that's trying to get into coaching, I mean, that advice right there, I mean, like you said, I mean, the value of what you experienced, nothing was wasted. But that is interesting. Like just that, I think a lot of young people, we don't take that opportunity to do that small thing in a big program to create the opportunity for ourselves, because a title, right? Our ego gets in the way. It's like, I don't want to be just a ball boy or just a film guy. I'm like, well, if you want to get into football, or if you want to get in whatever industry, you got to start somewhere, and, you know, might as well. But I will back up and say that's a little salt in the wound what you said about the 2001 team. As an Auburn fan, I don't like talking about those coaches who are a thorn in my team. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, but yeah,
you know, you bring up something interesting too, and I just want to like make note of this, and let's just stay like with the parallels of like high level college football. Like I ended up getting into the SMU football program, which was one of the bottom programs in Division One, right? Like 30 years of losing behind it, and like no real sense of culture or winning by the time I showed up there.
Right, which most people don't know about SMU. I mean, they had the only school to have really the death penalty. I mean, they're pretty decent now, but I mean, 15 years ago or whenever you started. Yeah.
Right. 2006 is when I started. And I was just going to say, you know, I think about this a lot just in terms of kind of like what I was alluding to. Like, is it better to be at like an Auburn or an LSU where you're one of maybe 50 people assisting the coaching staff, but like as a 20-year-old, 22-year-old, you're assisting, you know, guys that are going to be coaching in the SEC for the next 20 years or whatever. Or if you're at SM, and by the way, you might be at one of those bigger schools, and if you're 22, you're not doing anything, right? Like you're just there. So like when somebody's like, oh, hey, we're at camp and we need somebody to go like direct traffic. Hey, Cartwright, go stand in the street and point to the, you know, to the entrance of camp. Like that's the stuff you're doing. So you're not really having impactful experiences. You're around potentially impactful people in terms of your network.
Right.
At SMU, it was probably the reverse, where you're not in the SEC, you're in the lower levels of college football, but like there's only 3 other people here that are trying to do what I'm doing. So you start doing way more. So, you know, again, if you're at LSU in 2001, like great chance you're going to be a future Division I assistant coach or coordinator or head coach. But like, if you're at, you know, I'm just like picking a school out of like my hat, but like if you're at Syracuse 2001, 2006, probably not the same thing. So there's a balance to like competing at the higher levels, but then also like at the lower levels, there's less people, which means you do more. I don't have an answer for that.
You have more experience in your craft, and right. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's the balance of like the value of the experience or the value of the people you're around. Like both have value, and it's just, you know, creating that opportunity. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes.
So would you say SMU, that was your first big break, or what was kind of your first big break into coaching? Kind of dive into that. Yeah.
SMU was certainly my first big break. And as I mentioned, I'm from Dallas, Texas. Southern Methodist University is 5 minutes from where I grew up. So even though I wasn't even aware they were a Division I school growing up, because they weren't good, they literally would win 1 game every year. For me to come back to Dallas, to be close to family, and for those that are familiar with coaching are probably aware, like you don't make a lot early on in your coaching career. You have to really be at the high levels and have these very sought after, highly competitive jobs to start making real money in coaching. So for me, I started as a volunteer operations assistant, not making any money. It would have been very hard to go to a place like Syracuse or Iowa State or LSU and not make any money. And I was very fortunate that my family was from here, and I I lived in my grandparents' pool house for 4 years. So even though I wasn't making money, I was very fortunate to like not only have the support system of my family like here to like lean on emotionally and like have people to hang out with outside of football, but also like the reality is I wasn't making any money, and that really helped to not have to worry about that, to just hang out in grandma and grandpa's pool house.
Yeah. So what was your biggest lesson in that season of life? I mean, how many years were you there at SMU? And yeah, so what was the biggest lesson you learned from that experience?
So many lessons that we
Yeah.
could honestly do an entire podcast on it. I was there for 4 seasons. I
Mhm.
survived a coaching change. So I was there for 2 years with, I was there for 2 years with Phil Bennett, who was the head coach in 2006. And then in 2008, June Jones was hired to be the head coach. And I was fortunate to not only stay on, which is very rare, but I was also able to put myself in a position where at the time I was a video grad assistant, and they had promoted me to an on the field grad assistant working with the offense.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's like so many things are coming to mind when I think about the lessons. And let me just like pick one, because I think like the consistency of work and the prioritization of getting good at your craft is vitally important for success in any field. And again, I didn't know anything. I don't have parents or family in coaching. I'm not a player, so I've never experienced those competitive environments. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so I was learning a tremendous amount, not only because every year I was at SMU, I was in a different facet of the organization. One year I'm in ops, the next year I'm in video, then I'm doing recruiting, then I'm on offense, then I'm on defense. Yeah. So I'm working with everybody, literally within the program. I'm touching every part of the program. And, it was from when I first walked in the door, and I didn't, honestly, let's just say like I didn't know anything about football, to like the moment I walked out. And I definitely wasn't an expert, but I definitely had taken advantage of the 4 years that I was there. You can only do that through the consistent work ethic and showing up every day. And like, those hours can get pretty crazy. Like the last 2 years I was at SMU, we had 7 a.m. practices, and I had a lot of responsibility to prep for every practice. So I was in the office at 5 o'clock every day. And so I was mentioning my grandfather before, and I lived in the pool house, and that's when grandpa goes to work, is 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'd walk out in the driveway and there'd be grandpa, and he's getting in the car to go to work. Oh, what do you got today? Oh, I'm going to go practice and whatever. He's like, okay, cool. See ya. And it's like, that was consistent throughout my whole life. And that's like kind of like an untold story, or it's like a subconscious story where it's like, you're seeing this, you're not really computing like, dang, grandpa works a ton. You're just like, that's just part of who grandpa is. Like every time you walk over there on the weekends, he's sitting at the breakfast table working. So I think like having that instilled in me at a young age, and understanding and not complain. I never complained. I had like an extreme passion for like what I was doing and what I was building. I'm going to be the head coach at the University of Colorado one day. Like every day is a crucial element to me building that foundation for the greatness that lays before me. And I guess now looking back, that was a very unique mentality, and I didn't even realize it. Like that was, and this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, as I started to progress through my career, some people would meet me and whatever, like it's just in life, not everybody's going to be your best friend, but especially like when you're on a coaching staff, it's really interesting because like I talk to a lot of young coaches and a lot of young athletes who are drawn to me because of my story, or reach out to me because of my story. And I'm like immediately drawn to them. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Coach Burk, I heard this and this. Could you have 10 minutes? Dude, 10 minutes. I have an hour. Yeah. How much time do you want to come to Dallas? I'll have coffee with you. Like, that's how I feel. And so like, but not everybody feels like that. And like a lot of times you have to find the people that understand you. And I don't think a lot of people understood me, especially early on in my career, But as I progressed, I started to realize that the people I looked up to in coaching also understood me. So it kind of started to subconsciously tell me something else, that like the best coaches I was around understood that like I may not look like a football coach, I may not have played, I may not have a dad that's a coach, but gosh dang it, this guy shows up here every blanking day. He is sprinting down the hallway to get things done. And my mentality always was, you're either dominating or you're just getting by. And I don't just get by, I dominate. And so I'm getting way deep into the weeds now, but like these are the things that I took away from being at SMU during that time. And suffice it to say, it was an incredibly impactful, profound experience for me in my coaching development.
Yeah, that's awesome, Evan. Yeah. So, I mean, just a quick little note, if this is resonate with anybody in the audience, you can go to coachevanburk.com, check out more of him. But so, because there's just so much good stuff you just packed into that. I mean, one was just the mindset of like I want to make sure I quote you right, because that was really good. Every moment was crucial to the greatness that lay before me. Like that mindset, like, dang, everything I'm doing is building towards something. Like the intentionality of that mindset, like watching film, doing little menial tasks. Because I imagine some people know and some people don't. Just like when you work for a college program, there is so many little details and things that you have to do. So yeah, I just want to make sure I made a note of that and really get into that in a second. But I'm also just kind of like a little behind the scenes. What's it like being on a college coaching staff?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I think that like that was one of the things that always intrigued me. I always listened to I'm a press conference nerd. Mm-hmm. So even when I was coaching fourth grade football at the University of Colorado, I can still remember listening to Bill Parcells' press conferences because he was the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. And
talk about a master class of press conferences, Bill Parcells.
First of all, yes, no doubt the best.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was like a really, it's interesting. I mean, I came across, so, I'm sure we'll get into it here in a second, but like specifically to the quote you just said, like I've taken notes in every meeting I've ever been in. So like I have binders that are like this thick in this closet right here that is like 2006 SMU Mustangs, 2010 Miami Dolphins, 2014 UCLA, and I kept everything. And I took notes in every meeting because there might be some nugget that I can take with me like down the road. I'm going to want to remember this. And so I came across a notebook the other day from again, I know it's crazy, but like this is 2003, 2004. I'm coaching like JV football at the local high school. I'm coaching fourth grade football. And I'm like, I've written down notes on Bill Parcells' press conference that day. And it's, of course, like there's so much gold in there, but it's interesting how that started to shape the lens through which I viewed the game. And again, like feeding myself with very positive images to myself, like, oh, well, like I'm in college, I'm a 20-year-old, like a lot of 20-year-olds are running around doing different things. And, look, we all partake in that. Not saying that I didn't, but like, I was also very intentional about like, oh, I'm going to sit here and listen to this press conference for the next 45 minutes and take notes. So, I apologize now. I've lost like what your question was, but like, it's very interesting to go back and look at that as I was kind of developing during this time to all these notes that I was taking and kind of being, again, very intentional about what I wanted to create for myself.
Yeah. What I asked was give me a little behind the scenes of the college coaching staff. That's what it was, but that was really good. Yes. I appreciate you hitting on that mindset. Thank you.
The reason why I brought that up is because I would listen to these press conferences for Bill Parcells and I would be thinking like, oh, I wonder what he's like behind closed doors. Yeah. I wonder what it's like to like run, like to be in those meeting rooms and a little bit of foreshadowing, but I ended up getting a chance to work with Bill Parcells down the road when we were in Miami. Yeah. But, I was so intrigued by the recruiting process, by all the things that you didn't see on the field that when I got to SMU, it was really fascinating to me. Even just something simple like, we had like 3 sides of the room that had just these whiteboards, that are 20 feet long that just have like a whole host of names on them, because they're just like all the recruits in the state of Texas. They've got height, weight, high school, color coordinated. Those things like super intrigued me. Like, what does all this mean? What are we going to talk about? And so, college coaching staffs, and I think any coaching staff at the high levels, college or pro, like there's a certain bit of intensity in the environment. Like I've heard about some coaches, it's always 4th and 1 here. Okay. I never experienced that.
Yeah.
And I know some coaches try and build that and ratchet it up, but like even unsaid, there's a bit of intensity in every meeting, every day. Very rarely are you sitting around just cutting up, and you're there to get work done. And like something else to just remind the audience is like, you're there for 360 days a year. You maybe staffs will pretty much get like 4 weeks off in the summer, but like after that, you're pretty much there every day of the year. Maybe you might get a couple of weekends off like in the off season, but like starting mid-June, maybe like mid-July for some staffs, like you're there every single day. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, like you're there every day. And so like you spend all this time with these people and you're judged on 12 days in the fall. And so it's a really weird dynamic where, and we understand that's the nature of sports, but you don't get that in a lot of other places, right? Like you're part of a sales team, and you're graded every month. And I guess in that way, you're graded 12 times a year. Right. But like, you have like, if you don't have a great March, like starting April 1st, like now is a time to get after it and have a great April. Like it's not like that for football. Like you get off on the wrong foot or you lose a game you should have won, and like now you're about to face a daunting conference schedule. Like it gets very intense and very tight in those offices. So I think one of the things I would describe it as is just like an intensity. And like, you can't be too infatuated. I remember being like kind of infatuated or enchanted, if you will, like with going up to the press box at SMU Stadium and just kind of like overlooking the city of Dallas and this beautiful field. And like, that was very cool to me. But like, that has nothing to do with the on the field product. That has nothing to do with like what type of week we're about to have or what type of day you're about to have. That's just kind of like a cool little like 10 minutes I could create for myself, like going off and getting 10 minutes away. But like, once you step back in that office, like, I've seen a lot of coaches behave in ways that quite honestly were embarrassing, throwing temper tantrums, behaving in ways where if it was caught on camera, would be I guess in today's, parlance, like memes, to be quite honest with you. So I've seen some pretty embarrassing stuff from coaches. That stuff gets played up, of course. And, but for the most part, you're in a very, I know the podcast is geared towards a male audience, but it's a very male. Obviously it's all males pretty much, except for like a secretary or nowadays, like there's a lot of recruiting people that are females. But back when I was doing it, like there were no female coaches, and it's a very intense, like a lot of people trying to prove who they are, or maybe, there's probably a lot of things that they're dealing with personally that they quite haven't worked out with their therapist, or they maybe need a therapist. And I think that also, ego is a huge problem in coaching. And I'm kind of pointing out some of like the sore spots. But I think that's a result of the intensity and the pressure that a lot of these people are under.
Right.
And I will say this, the most successful teams I was a part of, that didn't really exist. That intensity. Right. So there was a confidence in the leaders and in the best teams I was on, where it was like, yep, this is what we do. We're very confident in what we do. Yeah, we're going to watch film. We're going to prep for the other player or for the other team. But like a lot of this is about how we respond. How do we respond to adversity? How are we going to come out and perform? So that was a really unique thing that I saw in some of the better teams I was on. And I'm just, I'm just talking about 12 unique seasons I was a part of. But I would venture to guess that a lot of coaches would probably say similar things. And I think that I was talking with a coach earlier today that I interviewed for my podcast. We were talking about about simplicity, and the best teams, and specific to football, the best offensive groups and the best defensive groups I coached were the most simple. They had the least amount of plays. And it's like, is there a correlation to that? And I would argue that, like, of course there is. Like, less plays means less to think about, which means quicker reaction time, which means more taking advantage of your talent and what makes you great at the sport and all these things. And it's like, I think coaches have a tendency to overcomplicate things. So that results in long hours. And that complicates things because now you're a coaching staff and you're paid to make decisions under pressure, and you're there at 5 o'clock in the morning and you go home at midnight. And it's like, when are you sleeping? And now here I am off on like a huge coaching tangent, but the environment is one of a kind.
Yeah. You painted a pretty good picture there. And that's interesting. You talk about the more successful, the urgency intensity is a little bit lower. That is interesting. So what, I guess next thing is what got you into the NFL with the Miami Dolphins, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. And I want to be respectful of your time. And I keep jumping into story times and all this other sort of stuff.
No, it's great. It's good stuff, man. So
essentially, like at the end of my time at SMU, I kind of made the decision I want to try and give the NFL a go and try and get in there. And so I didn't know anybody. I just knew the 20, 25 coaches or so that I'd worked with at SMU. So I kind of devised a strategy where I kind of like made a timeline of every coach I'd ever worked with from 1970 to 2009 and listed out everywhere they had coached. And then I did that same timeline spreadsheet for every employee in the NFL that I could find, that I could get my hands on social media, could find online. Yeah. From 1970 to 2009. And what I started to do was I started to cross-reference. So Cartwright knows Coach Smith with the Miami Dolphins. Okay, let me write Coach Smith a letter. And I would just be like, hey, Coach Smith, Cartwright says you're awesome. I work with him at SMU. I'm going to be at the Senior Bowl. I'd love to get your advice on getting a job in the NFL.
Oh, wow. Connecting, networking. Yeah. That's right. That's great.
And because I didn't have a network, and I don't have this typical path to coaching. Most people are former players, professional or college, or they're the sons of coaches or the sons of NFL executives. I didn't have any of that. Like, so I had to figure out a way that was going to, like, being self-aware enough, first of all, to like know that I had no name recognition, and that like nobody was going to take a look at me and think, oh yeah, that guy fits like my image of what we need. So I had to like devise other ways to make myself stand out. So I wrote handwritten letters instead of writing cover letters typed. I wrote letters handwritten. And so I did a couple of things. I wrote it on like a very specific SMU letterhead. I stapled my card in like a weird place on the letter. But I basically ended up writing 450 handwritten letters to try and like, exactly. To try and just like finesse my way into a conversation and like try and grow whatever connection that was. Those 450 letters resulted in 12 personal responses.
Wow.
Most just being, hey, Evan, just want to let you know, got your letter. Nothing at the moment, but we'll keep you in mind. But I got 12 responses that ended up leading to 3 interviews. That ended up leading to me getting my job in the NFL. And obviously I tell that story. I'm very proud of like my ability to go from 4th grade football to the NFL in such a short period of time. And I just tell that story because I think like it's powerful for the audience and honestly for me in kind of like what I'm doing now. I'm I'm in the midst of like a second career that I'm
Yeah.
building, to kind of remind myself too, like I've done this before, or for
Yeah.
anybody listening, like this is doable. Like,
Mhm.
and it's, I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I didn't do this on purpose, but I'm mentioning like the people that see it in you, or the people that can notice it in you. And like,
Mm.
I didn't need for 450 people to respond to my letters.
Yep.
I'm looking for the one that's looking. So my specific brand, being authentic to myself and writing a handwritten letter, some coaches might get that and be like, look at this idiot.
Yeah.
Handwriting his cover letters, what a moron, and like throwing it away. But there were 12 people that received that letter and either
Right.
called me on the phone or sent me a response. And I did all of this so that I could approach them at the Senior Bowl, a very intense environment where I didn't know anybody. And like, what am I going to do? Just walk up to Ozzie Newsome, general manager of the Baltimore Ravens, and just say, "Hey, Mr. Newsome, I'm Evan Burk, and I'm at SMU. I'm doing great things there. Have you heard about?" He's not heard about me. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
But by writing a handwritten letter and referencing whoever that was, it allowed me to go to that Senior Bowl. And when I found the people that I'd written letters to, I walked right up to them and I said, "Oh, hey,
Yeah.
coach. I don't know if you got my letter. I wrote it to you like 3 weeks ago, but I work with Cartwright at SMU, and he says awesome things about you. And I just want to come introduce myself. And actually, I'm going to be in Houston next week. Can I come meet you in Houston?" And I was doing these
Yes.
type of things where I was just like trying to find any way to get in front of people, let them know who I was, and kind of just try and find anything I could to like start the conversation. And so that is kind of the how I got in the NFL. And again, you're looking for the one that's looking. So I guess similar to dating, it only takes one.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I was looking for, and that was my attitude through that whole process.
Man, that's really good, Evan. Like I'm sitting here thinking, just for my audience, like you're right. That's a good point to make, because there's something always, like even like a sales technique. It's like usually only a certain amount respond, and then a certain amount actually go through and make an action. So it's like you have to expose yourself out here. And sometimes we think, oh, this is my one opportunity. This is in. If this doesn't work, it's not going to work out at all. And it's like not the mindset you need to take. You need to be like, this is what I want to do, and here are all the opportunities I need to pursue. And how can I make that happen and not wait around for it? And that's what I take from what you said. Like, man, I'm going to go make this happen. And so that's really good. So yeah, we're kind of coming up on time, but there was a note I made that I really want to kind of circle back to, especially with what you're doing now. Is you said that wrestling coach growing up, you had to find out quickly that his leadership style, his coaching style would not work for you. And so what was that transition like? And when did you have that revelation of like, man, I have to be my own unique leader and coach for me to be effective as a leader? So yeah, kind of break that down for me if you would. So yeah,
I'm really glad you asked that and brought that back into our conversation.
Yeah.
Again, I was trying a lot early in my career to be Rick Ortega because he had a huge influence on me. And so in football, that meant coaching offense, specifically wide receivers and quarterbacks at the time, and standing there with my hands folded. And when they did it correctly, not saying a word. And when they messed up, I would let them know that they had messed up.
Yeah.
And again, not saying that was 100% representative of Rick Ortega, but I was trying to be Rick Ortega. And I think at the end of the season, you asked about the moment was a revelation for me. So this is my second year coaching. I'm coaching JV football at the local high school in Boulder, obviously about to graduate as a student there. And we're on the team bus, and like this is the last home game of the year. The varsity is in the locker room, and we're about to like load the bus to go to the stadium to play the last big rivalry game, Fairview High School versus Boulder High School, for any people in Colorado out there. And I'm on the bus by myself with all of the JV team. I think the offensive guys in particular. And I don't know what made me do this, but I turned around. I was like, hey guys, I'm early in my coaching career and I'm always trying to get better. Does anybody have any advice for me or anything that I can work on in my coaching career? Cartwright, I don't know why I did that. I don't know what made me do that. It was literally the most inappropriate place and time to ask that. But I got to give props to my boy, Jay Thompson, who was a quarterback on the team, who I relentlessly like just badgered and like let him know everything he did wrong all season long. And he probably had a dartboard at home with my picture on it that he had just like torn to shreds throughout the season. And he goes, Coach, we know you care. You're here every day. You're always fired up. We know that you care a lot, but you're always letting us know what we did wrong. And you're never really positive when we do things right. So, I would just say, if we could, a little more positivity in your coaching would go a long way. And that's kind of a paraphrase of what he said, but that's essentially what he told me. And what a powerful moment for that young man as a 14, 15-year-old to say that. Like that. First of all, when your coach says like, hey, guys, what am I doing wrong? Like, tell me. For him to say that in that moment, not only props to him for having the courage and the confidence to say that to me, but it was incredibly profound. And I didn't take it the wrong way. It was almost like I kind of knew when he said it. I was like, oh, that's because I'm trying to be Rick Ortega. I stand there with my hands, with my arms folded. And that's not me. I'm a positive teacher. Like I'm not a gruff disciplinarian coach. That's not my style. Do I get intense? I don't know if it's coming through on the podcast, but like, I get intense easily. I get fired up very easily. But like I wasn't being true to myself as a coach. And so even though there's a ton of things I take from Coach Ortega, and I think I aspire to have the same impact as he did on me as a coach, but I can't coach like him because I'm not him. And so from that moment on, I had to define what I was about. And as I just mentioned, I defined actually for myself what my teaching and coaching philosophy was going to be. And I made the decision that I was going to be a positive teacher and a positive difference maker as a coach.
Man, that's awesome. So yeah, I mean, that leads into what you're doing now and the transition from coaching to now having a podcast, writing a book, being a coach and a leader and a speaker. And so, just from my audience, just kind of, just give a plug for what you're doing and how my audience can find you.
Yes. So I'm a speaker, a high performance coach, now an author. Thank you for mentioning that. And then a podcast host as well. My podcast is The Highest Level, which is kind of at the intersection of sports and leadership. So I interview athletes, coaches, team executives, and really just talk about what leadership excellence looks like at the highest level and how they build championship teams. My speaking and my performance coaching is very similar. It's a lot of what we talked about today on the podcast. And obviously around leadership and high performance and motivating teams. And then also the book that I just recently wrote is called Finding Intangibles. You can find it on Amazon, and it's really about the commonality of all the great performers and teams and how character is vitally important to achieving success, and the specifics around how do you find those intangible character traits that are often hidden and unseen. But for anybody that's experienced them, they know that they're there and they know that they're important. So it kind of started with me just noticing that the best teams and the best performers were not the most talented, but they always had the most character.
Yeah.
So if that sounds like something that interests you, there's a lot of, I know today was a lot of story time from me, but the book is more story time. So if you did happen to enjoy it, you can definitely check that out. And like I said, it's Finding Intangibles on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, Evan, I appreciate you coming on, man. This was great stuff. And I'm sure my audience will receive it really well. So thank you.
Cartwright, thank you so much. And I apologize for getting fired up, but my excitement was indicative of how much I enjoyed our conversation. So thank you so much for having me, man.
Man, absolutely. I enjoyed it and I appreciated all that excitement level. So